121 Indian citizens have died in that stampede in Uttar Pradesh's Hathras. Think about that number for a second, viewer. 121. It's a huge number. Hospitals in the area are filled with a large number of injured persons, barely alive, fighting for life. So expect that number, 121, to almost definitely go up. But the question I'm asking right now is this. Where is Narayan Sakar Hari, who calls himself Bhole Baba? In India's biggest state, a special investigation team has been ordered, viewer. Organizers of the religious satsang in Hathras have been booked. Officials have been show-caused or suspended. But this God-man is nowhere to be found. Amazingly, he isn't even named in the police FIR. And even so, he has just disappeared. One would have thought that a so-called God-man who has just presided over a satsang where over 120 of his devotees, mostly women and children, have died painful blunt force injury deaths in that stampede, one would have thought that he would stick around. He would have some shame to stick around, to make himself available, to present himself to the authorities, to promise help, to mobilize support and resources for the wretched, miserable, grieving families. The bodies are being piled into trucks, into vans like goats, like garbage, and being taken away. But this shameless so-called God-man is nowhere to be found. He has just vaporized. And he's being allowed to disappear because he clearly is a very powerful man. The question is, what is the price of making this man also answer some tough questions? Is it 120 bodies? Will he be summoned? Will he be named in an FIR if the death toll crosses 150? What is that number I want to ask today? What is the price of human life? Bhole Baba is only the latest example of so-called godmen. In my view, they're all quacks, being allowed to risk the lives of their poor, underprivileged, desperate, disenfranchised devotees who see their faith in smooth-tongued sermon givers like this guy as perhaps a way out of a miserable, wretched life. I'm nobody to comment on faith. Just because I have no faith doesn't give me the right to comment on others. But this is not an issue of faith or spirituality. This is a cold, hard issue of crime and punishment, of law and order, of privilege to run away and leave behind 120 dead bodies. Imagine if the tragedy that befell Hathras had struck the affluent, the privileged, those shielded by wealth and influence. Would Bhole Baba be allowed the luxury of disappearance? Let's just imagine that for a moment. Beyond the pathetic politics of selective outrage by a class that doesn't bat an eyelid for Hooch tragedy victims in Tamil Nadu, but dances over the corpses of the Hathras dead, would headlines scream louder? Voices of outrage echo from every corner of the nation if the victims in Hathras were actually rich people and the location was not Hathras but one of our metropolitan cities? Would the corridors of power tremble with urgency, demands for justice reverberating through every institution? Would the wheels of justice turn swiftly, determined not to let the powerful evade accountability? These are rhetorical questions. They're making me laugh, and I'm sure they're making you laugh, because the obvious answer to each one of these questions is yes. And the only reason that many of these questions don't have answers right now is because every one of the 121 people who died in Hathras is poor, is wretched, is miserable. In this case, an obscure God-man who has obviously been allowed to get fat on the fuel of the wretchedly poor, so much so that his runaway act isn't even raising eyebrows in the background of the 121 dead bodies that he's left behind, many of them in this huge crowd that he was not authorized to have. What if 121 satsangis had died in a stampede in a posh South Delhi colony? Believe me, big religious satsangs happen in all of India's big cities. They most certainly happen in leafy green avenues in India's national capital. But there, of course, the profile of devotees means that the administration, the official machinery, and indeed even the godmen cannot risk life and limb of their audience. Because if rich people die in large numbers, the system is not equipped for a response. It will simply not know what to do. Imagine if a whole bunch of rich Delhiites die in a stampede in a South Delhi satsang. It will never happen. It will never ever happen because the system ensures that such things can only happen to poor people. As in Kalakurchi in Tamil Nadu and Hathras, when so many people die, it will always be India's poor. And that brings me to the figure I promised I would end this piece with. What is the price of human life among India's poor? I don't need to say it because you already know the answer. It's zero.